Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere warm, ancient, and unexpectedly leafy. Imagine a garden so precisely trimmed that the trees line up like palace guards, each branch posed, each leaf placed with ceremonial pride. The air smells like crushed myrtle and dust baked in the sun. And off in the distance, past stone lions and irrigation ditches, you hear the soft clang of bronze tools and sandals shuffling through gravel. You're about to join the royal gardening crew of Assyria. Just one warning, you probably wouldn't last an hour out here. Between the heat, the rules, and the very sharp bronze fish hanging from every gardener's belt, this is not your average landscaping gig. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're winding down from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day begins early. The kind of early that doesn't belong to humans but to birds, insects, and people who've memorized the sunrise. You trudge quietly through a narrow stone corridor, walls carved with proud kings and winged spirits, until you reach a doorway veiled with reeds. Beyond it, the royal garden. You step into a space so ordered, it almost feels unnatural. Every tree is measured, every bush shaped like a geometry lesson. And in the center of it all, a row of men in linen tunics are already at work, some barefoot, some humming, most armed with what look like flat bronze fish tied to leather cords. This is your new team, royal gardeners, and they take their job more seriously than some generals. One older gardener, let's call him Abaru, nods to you. He points to a cypress that has grown a little too enthusiastic near its base. Without a word, he hands you a fish. It's not alive, of course, but it's shaped like one long, flat, and glinting in the sun. The mouth is actually a carefully sharpened curve, perfect for slicing small branches. You turn it over in your hands. The spine is etched with something, a string of pictographs and the faint outline of a star. First cuts the quietest, Abaru whispers, and then points again. So you begin. The motion is slow, precise, meditative. You slide the bronze edge along a wayward branch and feel it give with a satisfying whisper. The tree doesn't fight it. It understands. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, especially under kings like Ashurbanipal and Sennacherib, was famous not only for military power, but also for its palace gardens, highly engineered, ritually managed, and often viewed as divine representations of cosmic order. These weren't just places to stroll. They were political statements rooted in soil. You move from tree to tree under Abaru's watchful gaze. The fish blade hangs easily from your belt now, swinging like a talisman. The other gardeners barely speak, but they nod at you when a cut is especially clean. Praise here is subtle. Like everything else in the garden, the sun climbs, and the heat becomes a character of its own. Not aggressive, just persistent. Like a supervisor who doesn't blink. You wipe sweat from your brow with a corner of your tunic. Somewhere nearby, a fountain gurgles softly, feeding water into the underground clay pipes that keep the roots from thirst. And here's your first fringe tidbit. Some Assyrian texts describe fish of copper as tools not just for gardening, but also for ceremonial cleaning of sacred altars. Historians still argue whether the fish blade design had symbolic meaning, perhaps invoking the protective deity Ea, who was often depicted part fish. You pause at a fig tree, watching a pair of gardeners gently brushing dust from its leaves. They treat the tree like a patient, almost like a noble. The figs are just beginning to plump, green-skinned and full of secrets. Don't pluck early, Abaru warns. Suddenly at your elbow. Last time someone did, the king tasted it and sent them to count pebbles in the north wall trench. By hand, you nod. Noted. No premature figs. The hours pass slowly, but not unpleasantly. You find your rhythm. The bronze fish sings a soft rasp each time it cuts. You start to notice the way the trees lean toward each other, the way the paths form subtle spirals. Someone designed this with intent, possibly obsession. And then you see them, two stone lions, flanking the far gate, carved long ago, their mouths slightly open, as if mid-yawn or mid-roar. Their presence is more than decorative. It's supervisory. The gardeners never cut in their shadow without bowing first. You mimic them. just in case. As you turn to trim another overgrown olive limb, the breeze shifts and you smell something surprising. Cinnamon, just faintly. Abaru follows your nose and chuckles. Cinnamon oil, rubbed into the bark this morning, keeps away ants and nosy scribes. The day winds on. You don't realize how much you've done until you see the tidy row of trimmed trees, each standing like a soldier newly inspected. The bronze fish now feels like a part of you, warm from your hand. Its blade dulled slightly but dignified. You tuck it back into your belt and wipe your hands on your tunic. Abaru nods once, then gestures toward a shaded bench beneath a hanging fig arbor. Time to rest, he says. The trees are quiet now. They've had their say. You sit, body sore, brain fogged, but soul oddly calm. The lions watch. The water hums. The garden breathes. And for the first time today, so do you. The bench beneath the fig arbor is cool, even in the heavy sun. The vines curl overhead like lazy snakes, their leaves whispering secrets about irrigation, pruning, and which gardener once fell asleep mid-trim and dreamt of date palms talking in riddles. Abaru sits beside you, creaking slightly as he lowers himself. He unwraps a cloth bundle from his satchel flatbread, olives, a small square of cheese in hands. You half without a word. Gardeners don't need to talk much. They just know when you're hungry. You eat in companionable silence, watching a line of ants attempt to carry a grape husk twice their size across a sun-baked stone. Even the insects in this garden seem organized. Then Abaru speaks. Do you know why we shape the trees? He asks. You shrug. Mouth full of olive. Because the king said so. He grins. That's one reason, but the real one is older. Older than the king. Older than the city. Older than the stone lions. Even, he points toward a pair of cypresses, standing straight and symmetrical like twins, dressed for a formal ceremony. When the trees are in order, he says, the world is in order. And when the world is in order, the king sleeps better. You chew that over. Not the bread, the idea. In Assyria, nothing was left to chance. The empire was built on schedules, symmetry, and divine approval. The gardens weren't just pretty, they were political. A map of how the king thought the universe should look. Upright, aligned, and under control. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrian royal inscriptions describe gardens as recreated Edens, mirroring mythical gardens from ancient texts. These were not merely leisure spaces, they were microcosms of the empire, expressing domination over nature, over conquered lands, and sometimes even over the divine. A scribe once described the royal garden as a space where the gods themselves walk, if invited. But, of course, they'd need to submit a request in triplicate. You stand and stretch. Just as a young boy runs past in a panic one of the junior apprentices, his tunic is half untucked, and he's clutching something wrapped in green cloth. Abaru groans. Figs again. You follow him across the gravel path toward a tree that looks displeased. Hard to explain, but the way its branches sag, the way its leaves seem to curl, this is not a happy tree. Abaru gently unwraps the boy's bundle. Inside, a fig. Too soft. Overripe. Picked too late. Not too early. Still bad, he says. Still an insult. The boy hangs his head. Abaru waves you closer and hands you your bronze fish blade. Fix it. You hesitate. Fix the fig. No, he says. Fix the balance. And that's when you realize this garden isn't just about symmetry. You can see it's about energy, presence, the subtle give and take of roots and branches and wind. If something's off, even a single fig can tip the scales. So you step forward. You find a limb that has grown too long on one side, not visibly. No one would notice, but in a way the tree feels. You trim it. 1, 2, 3 cuts, soft as whispers, each slice bringing the tree back into quiet. You step back, and the tree relaxes. Abaru nods. Good. Here's your fringe tidbit. Assyrian tree pruning wasn't just agricultural, it was symbolic. Certain trees, especially those in palace gardens, were believed to represent captured lands. Their shape had to reflect not just beauty, but obedience. Some scholars believe pruning patterns mimicked military formations, subtly reinforcing control. You walk back with Abaru. The apprentice trails behind, still looking sheepish. At the edge of the garden is a tall wall carved with images of the king, always taller than everyone else, always pointing at something inspiring. In one panel, he's offering a pomegranate to a bearded god. In another, he's walking through a forest that seems suspiciously pruned. Historians still argue, Abaru says, whether the king actually gardened. You glance at the relief. He holds the tools like he's never used them. Abaru chuckles. Doesn't matter. The stories say he did. That's what matters here. You sit again, watching shadows lengthen across the gravel. The trees sway gently in the afternoon breeze. Somewhere far off, a water wheel creaks to life. The bronze fish at your hip glints in the fading light. Soon, Abaru says, we start shaping the myrtles. Why? Because they're jealous. You raise an eyebrow. I'm serious. He insists. Let one go too long without a trim, and it starts dropping leaves in protest. Passive-aggressive little things. You laugh softly, but you believe him. Because here, in the royal gardens of Assyria, nothing is random, not even the complaints of a shrub. You lie back on the bench, staring up through the arbor. The leaves ripple like waves. The scent of earth, fig, and bronze lingers in the air. And for a moment, everything feels aligned. By the time the next morning arrives, your hands already know the motion. You wake early again and the garden greets you like a familiar dream. Cypress shadows, lemon bark still wet from the dew, and that faint tingle in the air that says, trim with care today, or the trees will remember. Abaru is waiting by the tool shed, holding out a fresh bronze fish. This one's different. Slightly longer. The head is narrower, with finer etchings along the spine. You run your thumb over the grooves. Tiny cuneiform symbols shimmer faintly where the bronze has darkened with age. She sings. Abaru says, you pause. Excuse me. The blade, he clarifies, as though this is perfectly reasonable. When it's sharp enough, makes a little hum when it slices it air right. You're skeptical, but also intrigued. He shows you how to oil it with a dab of pressed date sap, then hands it over like a priest offering a relic. And you realize this isn't just a tool, it's a badge, a ritual object, a key to something older than pruning. You loop it onto your belt and begin your rounds. First stop, the pomegranate path. The trees here are thorny and temperamental, their fruit dangling like crimson fists. You start at the base, trimming tiny offshoots that have crept into forbidden geometry. The blade hums, ever so faintly barely audible, more like a vibration in your fingers. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Bronze tools, like pruning knives, sickles, and ceremonial blades were central to Mesopotamian life. But the Assyrians didn't just use them. They gave them names, wrapped them in linen, stored them in carved boxes. Some were even buried with their owners. These were instruments of civilization. As you move through the trees, another gardener joins you, younger than Abaru, a bit too cheerful for this early in the morning. He introduces himself as Tilu. I name mine, he says, lifting his own bronze fish with pride. This one's called Wind Slicer. You try not to laugh. I used to have another one. He continues, called Fig Ender. Lost her in a drainage trench. You nod solemnly. May she rust in peace? Tilu grins and points to your fish blade. That one looks old, really old, maybe even fish market old. What does that mean? He leans in. You'll see. Later that morning, Abaru leads you both to the eastern edge of the garden, where the trees grow in neat rows along raised clay channels. This is the fig sector. High maintenance, low patience. You notice something here. Each gardener's fish blade is slightly different. Some have holes punched through the body, like gills. Others are heavier, with short leather tassels. Abaru's is flat and wide, nicked at the edge, but sharp enough to shave a reed. Each one's made for a mood. Tilu whispers. Soft blades for fruit trees, narrow ones for vines, but the fish shape that never changes. And here's your fringe tidbit. Archaeologists have uncovered bronze tools in the shape of stylized fish across several Assyrian sites. Some believe these had ceremonial use. Others say they were practical. One theory suggests the fish represented the god Ea, protector of crafts and fresh water. A perfect patron for gardeners with knives and irrigation maps. Abaru stops suddenly and holds up a hand. You freeze. He crouches beside a small olive tree. Its shape is off, subtle, but off. One side leans too far, crowding a neighboring pomegranate. He gestures to you. Your blade hums again as you approach. You trim a branch here, another there, and then one final clip that opens the shape like a door. Light spills through. The tree adjusts, as if exhaling. Better, Abaru says simply. Tilu crouches beside you, watching. You felt it, didn't you? You don't answer. Because you did. And this, perhaps, is what makes the Assyrian gardens more than ornamental, more than imperial ego. They are alive, attuned, and somehow listening. A passing breeze rustles the fig leaves. Tilu taps your fish blade gently. Some say the really old ones were made from melted temple offerings. You glance at him, like repurposed ritual bronze. Exactly. Bells, shields, even idol fragments. Historians still argue whether that's true. Abaru adds from behind, overhearing. But that's what gives them their voice, their edge. You look at your blade again. The fish shape, the delicate spine, the almost sound it makes when it cuts just right. You wonder who used it before you, what trees it shaped, what rules it followed or broke. That night, as the sun melts down over the western wall, you sit on a low bench, polishing your fish blade with soft linen. The edge is cleaner now, the spine brighter. You listen to the faint creak of wind in the cypresses, and you could almost swear the blade is humming again, only this time it's in tune. The next morning, you're up before the first water channel trickles open, before the sun even considers rolling over the eastern horizon. You've been thinking all night about that fish blade. You can still feel it in your hand, even though it's safely wrapped in cloth beside your mat. That hum, that strange little vibration when the cut is just right, won't leave you alone. You start to wonder if it's mechanical, or magical, or just the wind. But whatever it is, it makes the trees feel more alive than you ever expected. Abaru is already up, sweeping dew off the path as with a broom made of bundled reeds. He doesn't say anything, just nods toward the olive sector and keeps sweeping. Today, the pruning isn't decorative. Today, it's disciplinary. You follow Tilu down a side path lined with low, squat olive trees, ancient, gnarled things that look like they've seen entire kings rise and fall. Their branches are all elbows and stubbornness, jutting every which way, leaves dense and grumpy. These trees, Tilu says, are bad listeners. You smirk. How do you punish a tree? He holds up his fish blade, with grace. And that's exactly what they do. The morning becomes a silent choreography of correction. The gardeners move through the grove in pairs, clipping, shaping, coaxing wayward growth into clean lines, not just for beauty, but for symbolism. Because when a tree disobeys the design, it reflects badly, not on the tree, on the empire. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrian kings saw gardens as a reflection of their own power to control the natural world. Gardens were designed not to imitate nature, but to discipline it, trees trained into rectangles, vines into grids, pathways perfectly measured in cubits. Even the chaos of flowers was arranged like soldiers in a parade. Abaru stops in front of a particularly rebellious tree. The left side is thick with shoots, the right, thin and sparse, unbalanced. He mutters. He takes your bronze fish and hands it to you without looking. You step in. The trick, you've learned, isn't about taking away, it's about revealing. You trim a branch here, another there, each cut deliberate, like a sentence in a royal decree. The tree doesn't fight. It hesitates, then leans slightly, as if accepting its new shape. Tilu watches, arms crossed. Not bad, he says. That one almost looks repentant. The air is warming now, scented with olive oil and sap. You pause to wipe your hands on your tunic and catch sight of the tool rack under the fig arbor. All fish blades, dozens of them. No two the same. Some short and wide, some long and slender, a few decorated with inlays of copper or faded beads. You wonder if each one has a history who held it, what it cut, what secret it hummed when no one was listening. You walk over, curious. Tilu follows. That one, he says, pointing to a dark green blade with a crooked tail, was once owned by a palace cook, used to prune herbs for the queen's vinegar garden. He points again. That one there, rumor is it was forged during an eclipse, slices cleaner than moonlight. And then you see the biggest one. Heavy, broad, edges dulled from years of use. The fish shape is nearly lost in scratches. What's that one? Abaru appears behind you. Ceremonial, he says, only used during the spring inspection. You raise an eyebrow. For show, for hope. he says. The king uses it to make the first cut, symbolic. It tells the trees, this year, grow well, or else. And here's your fringe tidbit. During annual spring ceremonies in some Assyrian courts, kings performed a ritual first pruning, witnessed by nobles and priests. Some sources suggest this wasn't just horticultural, it was a divine gesture, meant to ensure the empire's prosperity through a single precise cut. You pick up the ceremonial blade. It's heavier than expected, solid in your palm. The handle still smells faintly of cedar oil. You imagine the king holding it, making that one public slice in front of everyone. Pretending it was casual, but knowing it wasn't, you return to the olive grove, fishblade humming softly at your side. The sun is higher now, and the trees shimmer in the heat, leaves flickering like tiny mirrors. Abaru calls you over. Time for shaping, he says. He kneels beside a young olive tree, barely taller than your shoulder. Its limbs are thin, flexible, ready to learn. Shape it like a soldier. He tells you, so you do. Left branch straight, right branch angled, central trunk upright, balanced, disciplined. Not a wild tree, a royal one. When you step back, the difference is subtle but unmistakable. The tree has posture now. It holds its space with intention. You look up at Abaru. He nods once. You're starting to hear them. The trees. No, he says, tapping your blade. The fish. The day ends with a final lap around the garden, checking for symmetry, stray leaves, or drooping blossoms. You pass each tree like a sentry, inspecting troops. The bronze fish sways gently on your hip, as if satisfied. By dusk, the air cools again. The water channels close, and the garden, freshly trimmed, stands still, not sleeping, just waiting. The garden is quiet at dusk, but not silent. The kind of quiet that hums wind brushing over stone, leaves settling into their new shapes, a frog somewhere far off clearing its throat like it's about to give a speech. You walk the perimeter with Abaru and Tilu, checking each tree like it's a guest at a royal banquet. No sagging, no overgrowth, no unexpected blossoms. This is the moment gardeners live for. Everything in place, everything trimmed, everything holding its breath. Then Abaru stops. There, he says, pointing to the base of a pomegranate. See that? You squint. A leaf out of alignment. Just one. Tilu sighs dramatically. Not again. Abaru crouches. This tree wants attention. And just like that, you're learning about garden personalities. You've seen it before. Of course, you just didn't have the language. The myrtles with their jealous little flourishes, the lemons that drop fruit in protest when ignored, the figs that pretend they're ripe until someone bites them. The pomegranates, it turns out, are the divas. Each has a mood. Avaru says, the older trees know the rules. The young ones test boundaries. And here's your mainstream historical fact. In Assyrian court records, trees and plants were often listed not only by type but also by behavior. Some were praised for obedient growth. Others were recorded as needing intervention. These weren't just crops. They were personalities under surveillance. You kneel beside the pomegranate, fishblade in hand. The leaf in question is barely crooked, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's the whisper in a quiet room. You trim it gently, and just like that, the symmetry returns. The tree looks smug. Tilu laughs. You fed its ego. You move on, deeper into the rows, where the trees grow older and stranger. These ones aren't planted in perfect lines. They twist slightly. Their roots break the surface in places, like elbows nudging out of the soil. These are from the old regime. Abaru murmurs. Before the reordering, we don't trim them much anymore. They remember too much. You glance back at the newer groves. Strict geometry, perfect spacing. Trees shaped like ideas instead of organisms. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some Assyrian legends tell of whispering groves, clusters of trees planted before the city's foundation, believed to contain ancient spirits. These trees were often left uncut. Their irregularity was respected, not corrected. Some gardeners considered them sacred, others called them lazy. You come to a tree with bark that flakes in perfect squares. It smells faintly of ash and lemon. A small pouch hangs from its lowest branch leather, cracked, probably once used for herbs or ceremonial salt. Abaru sees you staring. Don't touch it, he says quickly. That one belonged to the fig whisperer. You blink. I'm sorry. The what? He waves a hand. Old gardener. Had a gift? Said he could tell when a fig was ripe just by its dreams. You try not to laugh. Tilu doesn't bother. He's already doubled over. Historians still argue. Abaru says, whether he was brilliant or just extremely allergic to hard labor, you move on. Fish blade brushing against your hip like a compass needle. The last grove of the evening is the topiary sector. And here, things get serious. The trees are sculpted into animals. Birds, lions, even a royal chariot. Each one absurdly precise. A peacock made from two intertwined myrtles. A lion mid-roar. Its mane trimmed weakly with surgical attention. You stare. Tilu shrugs. This is where the garden shows off. You walk between them. Humbled. Your own trimming now feels amateur. These trees aren't just tended, they're curated. One topiary, shaped like a winged bull, has a gardener perched on a ladder brushing its nose with a bunch of fennel. You stare too long and he nods. Dead serious. She gets sneezy if you skip the herbs. You can't tell if he's joking, and you're not sure you want to know. The sun finally slips below the wall. A horn blows somewhere near the western gate. The garden exhales. Abaru claps his hands. Done for the day. The tools are returned. Each fish blade laid gently into its wooden slot. Some are wiped clean with fig leaves. Others are wrapped in cloth soaked with cedar oil. You place yours last. It sits there quietly, still humming in your hand even as you let go. That night, you eat roasted lentils under the arbor and listen to Tilu tell a story about the time a squirrel snuck into the ceremonial myrtle and ruined a week's worth of pruning. Cost 3 gardeners their stipends. He whispers, the squirrel got promoted. You're not sure if that's true, but in a garden where trees have personalities and fish-shaped blades sing, it's not the strangest thing you've heard. You lie back, the stars starting to peek through the reeds, your blade beside you wrapped and warm, and in your half-dreams, you see it again, a single leaf, slightly crooked, and the soft shh of bronze correcting the world. The morning smells like wet clay and anticipation. Today, you're not heading to the olive groves or the lemon rows. You're following a shrew down the long, shaded corridor of cypress past the ivy-strewn sundial, past the reed-lined canal into Nineveh itself. This is a rare thing. Gardeners don't usually leave the garden, not unless something breaks or needs replacing. Or, as Abaru puts it, when the fish lose their teeth. He gestures towards your bronze blade, now wrapped in soft cloth and tucked under your arm. It's ready for sharpening, he says, or retiring. You glance down at the fish-shaped tool that's become something like a third hand. The edge has dulled, but the hum is still there, fainter now. More like the whisper of a memory than a sound. You walk. The city buzzes with life. Clay vendors squabble over pot sizes. Donkey carts rattle past with baskets of grapes. Scribes scratch hurried symbols into wax boards, while children chase each other between fountains. No one pays much attention to 2 dusty gardeners and their bundle of blades. But Abaru leads you with purpose into a side alley that smells like scorched tin and rosewater. At the end of it, a dark stall with no sign. Just a single fish symbol carved into the lintel. You've arrived at the fish smith. The man inside is older than the bricks. He doesn't greet you, just looks at the cloth bundle, sniffs once, and opens it like a priest handling sacred scrolls. His fingers brush the edge of your blade. He lifts it to his ear and tilts it, listening. Still sings, he mutters, but flat. He sets it on the work table beside a dozen other blades, each one shaped like a fish, but none quite like yours. Some are bright copper. Some are stained with turmeric or pomegranate juice. One has feathers tied to its handle. Another is wrapped in old hymn parchment. The fish smith selects a sharpening stone and begins. Long, slow strokes. Each pass of the blade against stone sounds like waves against a harbor. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrians were master metallurgists. Their bronze tools, especially in court contexts, were crafted with intense precision, decorative and functional. These tools were often traded or gifted across empires, and bronze fish blades have been found as far west as Cyprus. As the smith works, He hums, low, rhythmic, like the pulse of a garden in motion. Abaru taps your arm and leads you to the other side of the stall, where rows of finished blades hang like wind chimes. Each is labeled not with numbers, but with names. Dream Cut, Leaf Biter, Silence of Cedar. One catches your eye. It's silvered, the fish fins extended slightly like wings. The label beneath it reads, Whispers Before Rain. Tilu would love that one. The fishsmith finishes your sharpening and hands the blade back, wrapped now in linen, soaked in some oil that smells like mint and fire. It will cut again, he says, but it's nearing its final shape. You frown, final shape. Abaru nods. Every blade eventually takes on its true form. After enough use, enough years, it stops becoming sharper and starts becoming something else. Like what? Like memory. He says, and here's your fringe tidbit. Some Mesopotamian artisans believed tools had a final self, an ideal form reached after years of service. When the object began to hold the intent of every hand that had used it, these tools were often buried with their last owner or placed into walls as offerings to household gods. You step outside with your newly honed fish blade. The city's noise feels sharper now, more detailed. You hear a hawker selling melon slices, a priest chanting near a water shrine, a pigeon cooing on a clay roof. Everything is in motion. Everything is alive. Back in the garden, the air is noticeably cooler. A fine mist drifts from the irrigation stones, scenting the air with lemon and mint. Tilu greets you by the path, a smudge of pollen across his forehead. Get her sharpened, he asks. You unwrap the blade just enough to show the glint. He whistles. She sings again. You spend the rest of the day working in the central courtyard, trimming the royal date palms. These are tall, finicky trees with stubborn trunks and fussy fronds that droop if left unattended for more than a few days. As you cut, the blade hums again, clearer, truer. You find your rhythm easily now lift, slice, pull, step, addi. And then something happens. As you trim a narrow offshoot, the blade catches the branch just so, and you hear it. Not just the hum, but a note, faint, musical. Tilu looks up. Was that a G? You stare at the blade. Historians still argue. Abaru says from nearby, whether the singing blades were engineered or enchanted. Some say it's the shape, others, the sharpening technique, and a few blame the fishsmiths. Said they used moon-forged bronze. You glance back at your tool. Whatever the truth, it feels ready. Like it's been waiting for this day to remember who it really is. By the time the sun sets, the date palms are perfectly coiffed. They lean slightly inward now, toward the center of the courtyard, like gossiping priests. You oil your blade again, wrap it carefully, and place it gently beside your mat, where it glows faintly in the lantern light. No longer just a tool, but something else, something whole. That night, you dream of fish that swim through the air, not water air. They flick past you in rows, scales like hammered bronze, tails whispering as they dart between trimmed trees and coiled vines. One hovers close. It has your blade's eyes. It opens its mouth. And instead of a voice, you hear shears slicing clean through a myrtle hedge. You wake to a soft rustle. It's early, very early. The kind of quiet before the garden even stretches. And yet, someone is trimming. You sit up. There's movement in the topiary sector, barely visible under the pale sky. A shape steps between the sculpted trees, pausing, tilting their head, lifting something silver. You rise, quietly, wrap yourself in a woven shawl, and follow. It's not Tilu. It's not Abaru. It's a woman. She's tall, deliberate, and dressed in a robe patterned with curled vines and stylized lotus flowers. Her fish blade gleams longer than yours, with a hooked tail that flashes as she moves. She doesn't speak. She trims. Not in obvious ways. No thick branches fall. No dramatic reshaping. Just tiny corrections. A snip here, a flick there. And wherever she passes, the topiaries breathe easier, like they've been given permission to settle into themselves. You step on a pebble. She turns. New fish, she asks softly, eyeing your blade still tucked into your sash. You nod. She walks toward you, graceful as smoke. Let it cut what matters, not just what grows. And just like that, she vanishes into the myrtles. You stand there a while, then return to your mat. You don't sleep, but you don't need to. The day begins not with trimming, but with arranging. The garden archivist has arrived. A rare event happens maybe once a season or less. She comes to record the state of each tree, catalog tool conditions, and document any notable plant behaviors. She wears a robe the color of dry earth and carries three things: a wax tablet, a lapis stylus, and an attitude that could prune egos. Tilu straightens his tunic. Try not to blink too much. She'll mark it down as indecision. She walks the garden slowly, pausing at every fifth tree. She scratches notes in the wax, murmurs observations, occasionally raises an eyebrow with world-ending judgment. When she reaches your date palms, she pauses, runs her hand along a newly trimmed frond. Then, with the air of someone delivering a sentence, she mutters, "Acceptable." Tilu exhales like he's just survived a trial by fire. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrian palatial gardens weren't just for beauty or pleasure. They were bureaucratically maintained. Gardeners logged growth patterns, harvest yields, and unusual plant behavior on clay tablets. One record even notes a fig tree that refused to fruit without music. The archivist examines your blade, sniffs, then murmurs, "Fish lineage, Western alloy, copper heavy, but balanced." She scribbles, "You want to ask questions, but she's already moved on to the lilies." Later, under the arbor, Abaru explains, "Each blade has a genealogy. That one," he says, nodding to yours, "comes from the river smiths near Kartakulti, famous for their singing bronze. Your fish is probably fourth generation. Fourth generation, 4 users before you, each leaves something behind. And here's your fringe tidbit. In some temples, bronze tools were passed down in priestly lineages, with each user recording a small mark or hymn on the handle. Some blades became miniature chronicles cutting not just plants, but time. You examine the handle of your blade again. There are markings, faint, not cuneiform exactly, but a stylized spiral, a feather, a sunburst. Those, Abaru says, are user signs, not official writing, more like gardener graffiti. You add your own later that evening. Not carved, not branded, just a thin line of fig oil along the spine. Your scent, your print, invisible, but present, a signature in silence. As the stars appear, the archivist finishes her rounds. She nods to Abaru. He nods back. Then she leaves without a word. Tilu exhales again. She didn't confiscate anything. That's basically affection. You lie back under the arbor, your blade beside you. Its hum now softened to a lullaby. Somewhere nearby, the tall woman from the myrtles trims another shape into silence. And you wonder, how much of this garden is shaped by hands, and how much by memory? The morning begins not with pruning, but with mapping. Abaru hands you a thin clay board, the surface still damp and cool. Pressed into it are tiny raised dots, delicate lines, and what at first glance looks like the abstract doodles of someone very bored during a sermon. But then he hands you a reed stylus and says, "Trace it. Let the garden tell you where it wants to grow." So you do. Your fingers follow the faint ridges. Each curve maps a path. Each notch marks a species. You recognize the winding lines of the lemon grove, the grid of the olive quadrant, the swirling chaos that is the ceremonial poppy beds. And then you see something unexpected, a small spiral, tucked near the back edge. "What's this one?" you ask. Abaru leans over. "Ah, the whisper plot." "Of course it is, because every sacred garden needs a place where the logic of rose and ritual ends. The whisper plot, he tells you, is for experimental growth plants that don't quite behave, trees that bloom out of season, herbs that seem to vanish and return. It's fenced in with woven reeds and opened only on specific days, like some botanical dream journal. Tilu appears with a basket of odd-looking bulbs. "Guess what time it is?" You groan, "Whisper planting." He grins, "Whisper planting." You carry the basket together to the far end of the garden, past the trained figs and disciplined dates, until the walls fall away and the path becomes soft underfoot. The air shifts, less controlled, earthier. You can smell damp moss and something sharper like crushed sage or wet cedar bark. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrian gardens weren't just for aesthetic pleasure. They served as experimental grounds for acclimating foreign flora. Botanical specimens from trade routes were tested here before being introduced into agriculture. Some plants didn't survive, others thrived. A little too well. You kneel at the edge of the plot and begin digging small holes with your fish blade. The soil here is darker, looser. It clings to the bronze like it doesn't want to let go. Abaru stands nearby, reading from a wax board. Today, we plant fire lilies, ghost onions, and something labeled unknown vine, no clear root. You pause. Are we sure this is safe? He shrugs. No, but the garden has rules. And one of them is this. The whisper plot gets new voices, or it stops whispering. You plant the bulbs gently, pressing each into the soil with your palm, like tucking in a restless sleeper. Your blade is quieter here. No, just the sound of breath and earth. Tilu hums softly as he works, a strange tune, rhythmic and hypnotic. You glance over. What is that? He doesn't stop humming, just says, tradition. Here's your fringe tidbit. According to certain Sumerian-adjacent texts, gardens were believed to hear songs during planting. Specific melodies were said to encourage different growth traits. Height, bloom, even scent. Some gardeners carried flutes, others just hummed. By mid-morning, the bulbs are in. You pour water from a carved ewer shaped like a lion's mouth. The liquid hisses slightly on contact with the soil. You're not sure if that's steam or imagination. The reeds around the whisper plot sway. Even though there's no wind, Abaru nods. They've heard. On the way back, you pass the citrus arbor. Something's off. The air smells wrong, too sharp, too acidic. Tilu rushes ahead. A tree has dropped half its fruit overnight. Not ripe, not bitten, just discarded. Sulking. Abaru says, this one's done it before. You kneel beside it. The bark feels warm. You press your blade's spine against the trunk. Nothing. No? You try speaking softly, complimenting its shape, promising extra water. No change. Tilu crouches beside you. Try the song. You blink. What song? The fig whisperer's lullaby. That's not real. He shrugs. Neither are sulking trees. So you hum. You don't know the tune. Not really, but something slow. Something soft. And to your amazement, the tree shifts. Just slightly. One leaf twitches. A branch curls upward. You exhale. And Abaru whispers, you're learning. Here's your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these behavioral gardening practices were superstition or early plant science. Did the ancients observe plant responses to sound and mood, or did they project human patterns onto natural rhythms? Some claim it was early horticultural psychology. Others say it was just wishful thinking baked by the Mesopotamian sun. Either way, the tree seems happier, and your fish blade, when you sheathe it again, vibrates ever so faintly like it approves. As the sun climbs higher, the garden returns to its routine. You pass the date palms, the topiary lion, the old gnarled fig that smells like dust and ink. And you think about the whisper plot, about the bulbs curling underground, about the music in soil. The garden doesn't just grow, it listens. And tonight, when the stars blink awake above the hedges, you'll swear you hear it whisper back. The heat arrives with no warning. Not a creeping warmth. Not the usual Assyrian sunrise slowness. Just bam, like someone cracked open the kiln doors and let the gods' forgotten breath roll across the garden. You wake sweating. The linen mat beneath you is damp. Your fish blade, which usually hums with a soft chill, feels warm against your palm. Bad day for symmetry, Tilu mutters, already fanning himself with a sheaf of papyrus. Even the trees are slouching. He's not wrong. The garden looks tired. Leaves sag, blossoms droop, and the carefully maintained topiaries appear more abstract than intentional. The hedges that usually hold their square shapes have started to bulge slightly, as if protesting the effort. Abaru walks past with a jug of cold water balanced on one shoulder. Today's a day for shade work. He calls, find something horizontal. And so you do. You spend the morning tending to the creeping vines that wind between the ceremonial stones near the garden's edge. They're grape adjacent, though the fruit is mostly ornamental, bitter, and tart, unless pickled in honey. But the vines matter. Their shadows cool the nearby roots. Their twisty drama is part of the aesthetic. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ornamental vines and climbing plants were common in ancient Near Eastern gardens, not just for fruit but for shade, privacy, and symbolic associations. Certain vines were even trained to spell out phrases when viewed from balconies. You crouch in the heat, and begin your work gently untangling knots, tucking runners behind reeds, trimming excess growth with your bronze blade. It's quiet. The vines seem grateful for the attention, offering no resistance until you find the knot. A mass of tangled growth, thick as your forearm, coiled like a sleeping animal between two sun-warmed stones. It looks wrong. Old and new vines twisted together, one of them darker, almost black. You brush it with your blade's spine. It hisses. You leap back. Not loud, not snake hiss, just the sound of friction, of sap protesting. Tilu peers over your shoulder. Oh, that's a ghost knot. A what? He leans in. Sometimes vines remember being trimmed too much. They fight back. You blink, he shrugs. Or it's just bad pruning from last season. But I like my version better. You laugh, but you're wary now. You cut into the knot slowly, gently, listening as the fibers separate with a sound like someone peeling paper underwater. The core is dry, hollow. Inside, a tiny carved bead, just sitting there. You pluck it out and hold it to the light. It's shaped like a pomegranate, no bigger than your thumbnail, and made of what looks like fired clay. There's a single cuneiform mark scratched into the bottom. You call Abaru. He takes one look and whistles. That's an offering bead. You frown. Why was it in a vine? Some gardeners used to bury them in tricky plants. Little reminders, apologies, or bribes. Here's your fringe tidbit. Across ancient Mesopotamia, gardeners occasionally left pacification tokens in the soil, tiny offerings to keep plants cooperative. Some were symbolic. Others were literal gifts beads, coins, fragments of song lyrics etched in miniature script. Abaru pockets the bead. We'll offer it at the shrine later. For balance, you nod. And then he says, speaking of balance, the lemon arbor is acting up again. You sigh. The lemon arbor is your least favorite quadrant. Not because of the trees, they're pleasant, if a bit smug, but because of the frogs. The shrine at its center tends to gather moisture, which attracts insects, which attract frogs, which attract snakes pretending to be vines, pretending to be helpful. Still, duty calls. You find the arbor unusually quiet. Too quiet. The lemons have all turned to face the same direction, west, which is not ideal. Tilu arrives behind you, holding a branch like it's going to file a complaint. They're sulking again. Abaru studies the alignment, then points toward the horizon. There's a storm coming, and sure enough, you hear it. Distant thunder. A soft, guttural murmur rolling across the plains. Time to prune, he says. Storm branches only. Storm branches, those long, thin extensions that whip too far in the wind, likely to snap or tangle other limbs. You kneel and begin the delicate work of trimming just enough to please the trees, but not so much that they start passive-aggressively dropping fruit again. Your blade glides easily now. It knows the rhythm. You feel the storm in your ribs before the sky darkens. The leaves begin to tremble. A cool wind brushes the back of your neck. Historians still argue, Abaru mutters, whether plants actually respond to incoming storms, or if that's just us projecting drama onto leaves. You smile, then duck as a lemon launches itself from the top branch and lands with a dramatic plunk beside your sandal. You look up, noted. By late afternoon, the wind has picked up. The garden smells sharper, earthier. You finish your trimming and collect the discarded branches, bundling them with twine made from old fig bark. Tilu carries the bundle like a royal gift. You pause at the edge of the arbor, fish blade still warm in your hand. The lemon trees rustle gently, no longer sulking, just waiting. The storm breaks an hour later, not with violence, just soft rain, warm and rhythmic, tapping the stone paths, dusting the petals, washing the dust from the bronze blades. You sit beneath the arbor, letting it wash over you. And for a moment, it feels like the garden trims you. The garden hums with the sound of rain-swelled roots. Everything is cleaner today, leaves glossier, bark darker, the air laced with petrichor and wet stone. Even the koi in the irrigation channel seem smug, nosing through the rising water like they invented clouds. You and Tilu begin the day with sponge work wiping excess moisture from delicate flower petals, patting down wet stone benches, sweeping puddles into grateful citrus roots. It's slow work, gentle, the kind that makes your spine ache, but your brain exhale. Too much rains like too much flattery. Tilu mutters. Sounds nice at first. Then you slip and break your dignity. You nod solemnly while mopping the nose of a lion topiary that has decided to lean dramatically towards the east. The real task of the day isn't cleaning, though it's preparation. Because tomorrow, the queen is visiting. Well, a queen. Not the queen, but a cousin, or niece, or some politically convenient bride. You're not sure. What matters is, she has a penchant for jasmine, spiral fountains, and gardens that feel like secret prayers. No pressure. Abaru walks you through the plan. We retrim the eastern hedge maze, add fresh cinnamon mulch near the shrine, and, he sighs, we activate the bronze fish spouts. You blink. We have bronze fish spouts. He points toward a long, unused channel near the myrtle grove. Sure enough, tucked into the base of a stone wall are 4 carved fish heads, mouths open, eyes wide, tails coiled like question marks. They only spit if you prime the pressure valve, he explains, which means diverting the upper cistern, which means, lucky you. You get to climb. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrian royal gardens often included hydraulic features, gravity-fed fountains, ornamental water basins, and stone-carved water creatures. Fish motifs were common, associated with both fertility and the god Yibwal-Aye, lord of fresh water and deep wisdom. So you climb. The cistern is built into a stepped platform half-altar, half-water tower. It overlooks the garden like a watchful priest. Climbing it is awkward, especially with damp sandals and a coiled rope of canal vines slung over your shoulder. At the top, you find the valve, a rust-colored stone disc set into a carved basin. Your blade fits perfectly into the slot at its center. Of course it does. You twist. There's a groan, a rumble, then a whoosh as water rushes through unseen tunnels. Far below, the bronze fish heads sputter once, then begin spouting thin arcs of water that land in precise, graceful loops along the path. Tilu cheers from the ground. The fish sing again. Abaru watches quietly, arms crossed. Not bad for a vine wrangler. You bow dramatically, nearly fall off the cistern. And here's your fringe tidbit. In rare inscriptions, royal engineers mention tuning water features to specific patterns. Some believe the sound of water falling through fish spouts created tones that calmed palace nerves or encouraged prophetic dreams. As you descend, the garden feels brighter, more alert. Even the whisper plot gives a soft rustle, as if acknowledging the effort. Back on the ground, you turn to the hedge maze. This one's tricky, not just because it's huge, but because its design spells out a blessing in Assyrian if viewed from above. Which, of course, no one will see. But the queen's cousin will feel it. That's the point. You and Tilu get to work, clipping stray shoots, reshaping curves, whispering to the stubborn corners that always want to square up. He hums the fig lullaby. You counter with the lemon tree apology chant. By midday, you're both dripping with sweat and leaf bits, and then a shriek breaks the quiet. A gardener young, jittery, always trailing snacks, is flailing near the topiary wolf. It moved, he yells. The wolf. It twitched, Abaru sighs. Show me. You all gather. The wolf stares back, suspiciously leafy and very stationary. But then it does twitch, just slightly. A branch flexes. A paw curls. You peer closer and spot the issue. A vine snake. Glossy green, wrapped around the topiary's frame, stretching luxuriously in the sun. Tilu groans. Second time this week. They're nesting. Abaru nods. She likes the wolf. Probably thinks it's a mate. You very gently nudge the snake free with the blunt side of your blade. She slithers away. Not offended, just mildly disappointed. And here's your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether animals in royal gardens were considered pests, pets, or divine messengers. Some records suggest gardeners were expected to interpret their presence like omens, especially if they appeared in fountains or atop topiary gods. With the snake removed and the wolf pacified, you finish the hedge maze. The sun is low now. The fish spouts still arc gently. The garden glows. Abaru walks with you along the main path. You've done well, he says. You don't respond. Just listen to the rhythm of your steps, the whisper of trimmed leaves, the fading sound of water and birds. The queen's cousin will arrive tomorrow, but for tonight, the garden is yours. You wake before the birds. Not from nerves exactly, but from that peculiar pre-event energy when the air itself seems caffeinated, when the stones underfoot feel just a little more judgmental. When every leaf in the garden is watching to see if you'll trip over your own sandals, the queen's cousin arrives at mid-morning, not in a chariot, not in a royal litter, but on foot. She's flanked by two quiet guards and a tiny dog with a face like a boiled plum. The dog wears golden toe caps. You are not kidding. Golden toe caps. The cousin Lady Tashmitu is smaller than expected, wrapped in gauzy linen, her hair pinned with delicate copper twigs meant to resemble a sacred fig tree. She walks with deliberate slowness, as if moving too fast would cause reality to ripple. She steps into the garden and smiles. "Oh," she says, "it smells like intelligence," Tilu mutters under his breath. "Hope she doesn't mean us." You spend the first hour trailing the entourage through the garden's main path. Abaru leads, offering sparse commentary naming species, historical details, the occasional soil pH joke only he finds funny. Lady Tashmitu nods, though she seems more interested in the sounds, pausing often to listen to the cicadas, the trickle of the fish spouts, even the wind through the arbor vines. "This," she says, "is a listening garden." Here's your mainstream historical fact. Elite Assyrian women were often highly educated and maintained personal gardens. Some were trained in botany, others in divination using plant signs or dreams inspired by garden walks. Royal women were patrons of garden design, commissioning features based on omens, dreams, or poetic metaphors. Lady Tashmitu stops before the whisper plot. Her dog barks once, an imperious sound that somehow feels like a request for chilled wine. She gestures toward the reeds. "This is new." Abaru hesitates. "Experimental zone. Not usually toured." She raises an eyebrow, then steps in. You follow. The plot is in bloom. Not wildly, just enough. A few ghost onions have sent up pale shoots, their edges iridescent. The unknown vine, the one labeled "no clear root," has spiraled around its reed stake like a dancer mid-twirl. Even the soil smells content, warm and fungal and mysteriously fruity. Lady Tashmitu kneels, pulls a tiny crystal vial from her sash, sprinkles a few drops onto the soil. "What is that?" you ask, before remembering you're not technically supposed to speak. She smiles, crushed lapis and rainwater. "For clarity." Then she looks up. "Did you know," she says, "that gardens sometimes decide who is allowed to shape them?" You blink. She rises and dusts her hands. "This one has chosen you." Tilu claps once, softly. "Promotion by divine shrubbery. That's rare." She thanks you all, leaves with a gift basket of preserved lemons, dried fig slices, and a tiny hand-carved fish blade replica. Even the dog seems satisfied. When the gates close behind her, Abaru exhales. "Well," he says, "that went better than the delegation from Elam." You all nod. No one brings up the Elam incident. The garden still hasn't fully recovered. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some elite gardens were believed to have moods. If a visitor disrespected sacred trees or mocked the pruning layout, the plants would reject them. There are records of guests being pelted with fruit or tangled in vines. One diplomat allegedly slipped on a prophetic olive. With Lady Tashmitu gone, the garden sighs back into itself. You walk the path slowly, rechecking branches, smoothing soil, retightening fish spout ropes. The whisper plot hums. The fish blade on your hip feels heavier earned. And then Abaru calls you aside. "There's a task," he says. "You've earned." He leads you to the base of the cistern steps. You expect another valve, maybe a hidden fountain. Instead, he hands you a clay-wrapped scroll. "This," he says, "is the Codex of Cuttings. It's older than any of you. Written by the founder of the garden, part manual, part memoir, part sleep-deprived poetry. It's passed to whoever the garden chooses next. And apparently, that's now you." You unwrap the scroll. The first line reads, "If you are reading this, congratulations! You've been adopted by a kingdom of chlorophyll." You read for hours. The text shifts from planting cycles to stories of weeping fig trees, of vengeful mint, of a gardener who married a topiary by mistake and never looked back. Here's your scholarly debate. No consensus exists about whether the codex is real. Some claim it was a fiction passed around bored temple scribes. Others believe fragments were found in Nineveh's ruins. Still others insist it was oral lore, never written but always remembered. That night, you add a line of your own, scratch lightly into the scroll's edge, barely visible. The fish blade sings, "I'm listening." The garden rustles in approval. The next morning, you wake to a single fig leaf on your chest. Just one. Perfectly symmetrical. Still dewy, no tree nearby. You take it as a compliment. Today is Fig Harvest Day. A mildly chaotic ritual involving ladders, baskets, poetry, and more bees than anyone ever mentions in the job description. You meet Abaru and Talu beneath the oldest fig tree in the grove. It leans slightly to one side, like it knows more secrets than it should and carries them all in its bark. Name's Ishtar's elbow. Tilu says, patting its trunk. Because it bends where logic ends. You're not sure what that means. No one ever is. The process begins with a chant. Yes, really. Not because the tree demands it, although it might, but because tradition says figs grow sweeter when serenaded. Tilu leads the melody. Abaru waves burning myrrh. You shake a rattle carved from dried pomegranate husks. It sounds like a very polite thunderstorm being slowly unraveled. Then you climb. The tree resists at first, branches swaying slightly, one of them slapping your elbow just hard enough to remind you who's in charge. But once you're nestled among the upper limbs, it quiets. The figs are warm in your hand, soft and purple-brown, oozing tiny threads of sweetness when gently squeezed. You pluck them carefully, dropping them into a cloth sling that smells faintly of last year's lemon harvest. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Figs were a staple fruit across the ancient Near East, prized not only for their taste and long shelf life, but also for their symbolic significance. In Assyrian texts, figs represent abundance, protection, and the line between cultivation and wildness. You pause to eat one. Juice dribbles down your chin. You feel momentarily immortal. Below, Abaru examines a fallen fig, slices it open with his blade, and nods. No worms. The worms respect us today. Then a bee flies directly into his ear and he reconsiders that statement. As you descend, you notice something odd. The bark under your palm has markings, scratches that seem too deliberate to be random. You call for Tilu. He peers at them, tilts his head, and grins. Ah, the fig runes. The what now? Old gardener code. Messages from past climbers. He reads aloud. Branch 4 wobbles. Avoid the left elbow. Do not snack too early or tree will sulk. You laugh, but you also step very gingerly off branch 4. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some temple gardens use living trees as message boards, scratch notes, not signals, or even pigment-dyed bark to indicate status. In a few rare cases, full pruning maps were hidden inside fig groves, passed from gardener to gardener without ever being written on paper. Back on the ground, you help sort the figs into categories. Eaters, dryers, shrine offerings. Questionably, soft, definitely cursed. These are handled with tongs and quiet side-eye. The shrine offerings are placed in a basket lined with sage and barley straw. You carry them to the garden shrine, a low stone altar nestled under a canopy of pomegranate and juniper. There, you arrange the figs in a spiral. Tilu lights a small censer. Abaru hums something ancient. And just as you finish the offering, the wind shifts. A soft breeze, unnatural in direction, rustles only the shrine trees. You all freeze. Then Abaru smiles. She's pleased. You don't ask who she is. You don't have to. As you return to the main path, a gardener you've never seen before passes you a folded piece of linen. Inside is a small, dried leaf wrapped around a tiny bronze pin shaped like a fish. Blade bearers get first fig wine, he says, then vanishes behind a hedge. You look at Tilu. He shrugs. You've been officially weirded in? Congratulations! Later that evening, you're invited to the fig wine tasting. It's held near the whisper plot. Of course, there are low cushions, reed flutes, and bread smeared with fermented date paste. The wine is thick and sweet, spiced with cinnamon and the tiniest hint of rose water. It tastes like the memory of being 5 and safe, and slightly too warm under a wool blanket. Here's your scholarly debate. Some researchers believe early wines and fermented fruit drinks were only for elites. Others argue that fig and date brews were common among gardeners and temple staff, consumed not for intoxication, but for ceremonial closeness to the plant spirits. Abaru raises a cup. To the tree that shares. Tilu raises his. To the bee that miss. You raise yours and say, to the blade that hums. The garden rustles approval. Somewhere, a fish spout burps quietly. You sleep beneath a fig tree that night, dreaming of branches that speak and leaves that laugh, and a pomegranate that rolls uphill, laughing at gravity. Morning comes slower under fig trees. You wake to the low, steady thrum of bees and the occasional dry plop of a fruit giving up on gravity. The garden feels quieter today, like it, too, has a fig wine hangover and isn't in the mood for sudden movements. Tilu is already up, brushing mulch from his beard and sipping from a cup of sour barley tea. Big day, he says, without explaining. You stretch, your muscles hum in protest. Your fish blade, resting beside a half-eaten fig, glints lazily in the sun. Abaru arrives with a small scroll and a serious face. The archive is open, he says. You're going. You blink. The archive. He nods. The subterranean record of all cuttings, clippings, graftings, and other curiosities. Every blade bearer visits once. Once, Tilu adds helpfully. Twice is discouraged. 3 times and your topiaries start whispering. You're given a torch, a key made of something too green to be metal, and instructions not to sneeze near the lichen walls. The archive entrance lies behind a wall of moss, hidden near the lemon arbor. You've walked past it 100 times without noticing. The lock clicks open with a wet, mossy sigh. The stone creaks inward, and down you go. The stairs are narrow and winding, carved with old symbol spirals, fish, half-suns, and what might be a diagram of a fig tree teaching a class. The air smells like dust, cedar resin, and things that were once alive but decided to retire. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Assyrians maintained extensive written records, not only in temples and palaces, but also in gardens. These included planting calendars, soil notes, omens, and even musical notations for when to prune specific trees. At the bottom, the archive opens into a round chamber lit by glass tubes filled with glowing algae. Vines hang from the ceiling. Every surface is carved with tiny, looping cuneiform. Some passages are labeled in ochre ink. Storm years, blessings from bees, unauthorized prunings. One alcove is titled, Unrepeatable Mistakes. You spend hours reading. There are scrolls about failed melon experiments, notes from a gardener who tried to trim trees using only his voice results. Mixed. A section titled, Figs We Don't Speak Of. You recognize the handwriting on a few entries, Abaru. Tilu, even someone named Fishblade 3. You wonder if you're Fishblade 4. Here's your fringe tidbit. Certain clay tablets discovered in ancient Mesopotamian garden sites include poetic reflections written by gardeners. One fragment reads, My shears weep where I prune joy. The leaf falls with a secret. You find a door labeled simply Echoes. Inside, you discover the room is circular, acoustically tuned. No books, just sound soft echoes triggered by movement. When you step onto the floor, you hear layered whispers. I prune after third moon. On she bent too far toward the sun, while my blade sang only when she watched. It's not creepy. Not really. More like walking through someone else's garden memories. You speak just one word, symmetry, and the room answers in a dozen soft voices, some male, some female, some neither. Yes, balance is breath, balance is blade. You step out, dazed, and make your way back to the main chamber. Before you go, you're told to add your entry. You choose a slate wall near the spiral staircase. Your fish blade carves easily. Today I learned the vines remember everything, especially the jokes. A vine from the ceiling lowers a single leaf in response. Approval. Maybe. You emerge into the lemon grove. The sun's higher now. Abaru waits with a cup of mint water and a knowing look. Did it change you? You nod. I think I'm 20% archive now. He pats your shoulder. Good. Tomorrow's the fish blade trials. You blink. Those are real. He grins. You'll need a partner. You look at Tilu. He's already practicing lunges with a ladle and shouting, on guard. Shrub. You sigh. Here's your scholarly debate. Historians can't agree whether garden blade rituals duels Competitions, or symbolic prunings, were real events or metaphorical exercises in balance and discipline. Some texts suggest entire festivals were once devoted to competitive hedge trimming. You spend the afternoon preparing, sharpening your blade with a stone rubbed in orange peel, practicing hand signals, choosing your challenge. Plot a deliberately tangled square of garden that needs to be sculpted into a meaningful shape using only instinct, rhythm, and absolutely no math. That night, you dream of fish blades leaping through fountains, of vines clapping politely, of whispers that say your name and chuckle afterward. You sleep well. Tomorrow, the garden watches. Dawn doesn't so much arrive as sneak in with a cheeky grin. You're already awake. Standing at the edge of the trial plot, a tangled mess of myrtle, overgrown fennel, and what might be a defiant elderberry bush that has never heard of boundaries. Your blade hangs at your hip. Tilu stands beside you, wearing a headband made of basil and what can only be described as theatrical confidence. Today, he whispers, we trim not for beauty, but for revelation. You nod solemnly. Then, what does that mean? No idea, he says. Just sounded profound. The trial begins with the ringing of the pruning bell, a flat disc of bronze suspended from a fig branch, struck gently with a peachwood mallet. It makes a sound like a yawn in a cathedral. Gardeners gather in loose rings around the plot. Some sit cross-legged. Others bring date cakes and citrus tea. There's light betting. One apprentice has a sign that says Team Fishblade. Abaru steps forward, reading from a scroll that seems more ceremonial than instructional. Let the trial begin, he declares, with clean blades, clear minds, and no yelling at the elderberry. You and Tilu step into the plot. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Assyrian festivals included practical competitions, plaster layers, bakers, gardeners, even flute players, each demonstrating their craft before judges or royalty. Garden trials were rare but documented, often held to select master cultivators or royal groundskeepers. Your task? Transform this wild space into something symbolic. Using only what grows within, you decide on a spiral, not just any spiral, a double-looped glyph representing seasonal harmony. Adapted from the Codex of Cuttings, it's elegant, forgiving, and notoriously difficult to center. Tilu handles the inner loop. You take the outer. Snip by snip, the jungle becomes a message. It's not fast or flawless. The elderberry slaps Tilu's face twice. You accidentally cut a fennel stalk that releases a cloud of angry spice and regret. But slowly, the pattern emerges. Gardeners begin murmuring. Someone starts humming the lemon chant. And then, just as you near the final curve, a bird lands on the topiary shaped like a crouching bull and sings a perfect note. Everything stops. You step back. The spiral glows not literally, but in the way a well-trimmed beard glows, with dignity, with purpose. Abaru steps in, inspects your work. He plucks a fennel flower, holds it to the light, and nods. It speaks, he says. You exhale for the first time in what feels like 2 hours. Tilu fist bumps a shrub. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some Assyrian gardens included speaking spaces layouts designed to guide visitors emotionally or philosophically through curated paths. Certain symbols, such as spirals, were believed to calm the mind or encourage dream clarity when walked at dusk. The crowd disperses with nods of approval. A few gardeners linger to trace the spiral with their fingers. One apprentice whispers, I think the fennel blessed me. You and Tilu collapse under the tamarisk tree and accept slices of melon from an enthusiastic elder, who insists the trial reminds him of his second marriage. Abaru joins you, holding a rolled reed scroll. You're now listed, he says, officially, as Blade Bearer 4th Order. You blink. There are orders. There are now. He hands you the scroll. Inside is a map, not of the garden but beneath it. Paths, waterways, seed vaults, even a chamber labeled "Do not laugh in here." Tomorrow, he says, you go deeper. Of course you do. Here's your scholarly debate. Historians argue whether garden hierarchies existed beyond function. Some see titles like Blade Bearer or Seed Keeper as honorific. Others believe a full initiatory structure existed, almost religious in form, with secrets passed only to those who had earned the soil's trust. That night, the garden is unusually still. Even the fish spouts seem to whisper less. You sit at the edge of your trial plot, staring at the spiral, listening to the soft rustling of satisfied branches. A fig drops from above and lands perfectly in your hand. You smile. It's a good sign. You wake to the sound of water, but not from the fountain or the irrigation channels, or even the drip jars placed strategically near the citron grove. No, this is deeper, older. You follow the map, past the whisper plot, through the tamarisk arch, down a path lined with stones that bear etchings only visible at dawn. The moss underfoot thickens. The air grows cool, then cold, like the garden has dipped into another season entirely. You reach the hatch. It's carved into the earth beneath a sprawling jujube tree, concealed by layers of woven grass mats and a matronly bush that smells faintly of wet socks and fennel. You open it and descend. The steps are carved into limestone worn smooth by generations of gardeners, archivists, dreamers. Your torch flickers against damp stone and reveals murals, stylized blades trimming stars, roots wrapped around moons, a tree giving birth to a fish. At the bottom is the chamber. It's round, silent, and filled with scent. Myrrh, decay, cinnamon, old paper. Shelves circle the walls, packed with bundles, some labeled, some mysteriously blank. A table in the center holds a single object. A bronze fish blade, identical to yours but clearly older. Its edge is polished to moonlight. Abaru stands in the corner, arms crossed. You made it. Tilu is also there, holding 2 cups of something steaming and beige. Welcome to root level. Abaru gestures to the blade. This was the first, the one that shaped the spiral of olives after the 37-day drought, the one that hummed before the northern quake, the one that convinced a jealous queen to let the garden survive. You nod. He steps closer. Every blade bearer leaves a mark here. Not a carving, a question. You hesitate. A question. He nods. To the garden. To the future. To yourself. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Sacred tools in ancient Assyrian gardens, pruning knives, planting sticks. Irrigation spouts were often passed through generations and associated with mythic events. They weren't just instruments. They were witnesses. You approach the blade. It hums faintly when you lift it. Warm, balanced, familiar, yet impossibly ancient. You kneel, as tradition now clearly demands, and press your own blade beside it. A spark leaps between the two, quiet, like a sigh of recognition. You close your eyes and ask your question. What will the garden remember when I'm gone? The room doesn't answer, but the walls seem to lean in, as if listening, as if they, too, wonder. You return your blade to your side. The others nod. Tilu offers a scroll. It's wrapped in fig leather and smells of nutmeg. Codex Addendum, he says. Volume 2. You smile. Here's your fringe tidbit. In some regions, garden scrolls were bound, not with thread, but with twisted plant fibers dipped in honey and salt. A mixture said, to preserve memory and deter hungry ants. You climb back up into the garden just as the first rays of dusk filter through the citron branches. The garden welcomes you. The spiral glows golden under the fading light. Leaves sway in a rhythm that feels like breath. Here's your final scholarly debate. No one agrees whether the Assyrian garden was simply a collection of useful plants or a living archive, a sacred labyrinth of memory, ritual, and quiet rebellion against forgetfulness. You believe the latter. As the stars blink awake, you walk one last round of the path. Figs nod, reeds whisper. The fish spouts bubble their approval. The blade at your hip is quiet, but not silent. It listens, just like you. And now, the garden quiets. The last fig has fallen. The fish blades are sheathed. The whispers tuck themselves gently into the reeds and sleep beneath the soil. You sit on a warm stone bench near the citron grove, your hands smelling faintly of mint and memory. The moon rises not full, not shy, just enough to dust the garden in soft silver, like the breath of a dreaming god. Somewhere behind you, a reed flute begins to play itself, slowly, like it remembers the tune from an old gardener's wedding, long forgotten and sweet with burnt honey and lemon oil. The trees don't move. They breathe. The vines curl not to bind, but to cradle. The fish spouts, those strange bronze watchers, release a final sigh of water cool, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the soil itself. You lean back, and the garden leans with you. Time bends. It no longer matters whether it's 700 BCE or last Tuesday. The spiral remembers, the codex hums, the blade, still warm at your side, promises not to forget. And so, you let go of the weight behind your eyes, of the pulse in your hands, of the long trail of footsteps that brought you here. Let the garden carry them now. Let the figs fall without worry. Let the reeds sing softly. Let the fish spouts dream in bronze. And if you listen closely, not now, but later, when you drift between sleep and memory, you may hear the garden answer your question, or not. That's okay. It remembers either way.